What interesting facts about diseases do you know? Autism may be the price of human intelligence. Researchers discovered that autism's prevalence may be linked to human brain evolution. The findings comparing the brains of different primates suggest autism is part of the trade-off that made humans so cognitively advanced. I personally think a lot of our mental issues are the price of both our intelligence and our conscious knowledge of self as individuals mortal. That and living in a world that has changed so much quicker than evolution can adapt. A few thousand years ago, and we were spending most of our time just collecting food. So much this. Evolution can't even begin to keep up with our rate of change. Watched a lot of documentaries on Neanderthals this last week. They stayed in small bands of 10-30 individuals, which meant they would never have had long-distance trade with other groups. They hunted and gathered, but never cultivated or domesticated, which meant they'd never have villages. But they were humans all the same, humans who took care of their injured disabled. They made art. They did ritualistic things with their dead to honor them. Imagine a human perspective like that, with all the same emotions and feelings you have, but no science, no religion, nobody to offer an explanation for the stars or the wind. Just you, a small group you love deeply, and the wild. And think about Homo sapiens having large populations, having better tools, and they came up to Eurasia and bred the Neanderthals into a small little percentage of modern human DNA. Then think about us now. Being admittedly unevolved for the world we've created, we're hunter-gatherers who put on TIs and shiny shoes and operate computers that serve up answers most of us couldn't conjure by our own wits. And you might start to wonder if we're now the Neanderthals, and something more better equipped for this world could take our spot. It's why loneliness is so incredibly endemic. Imagine living in a tribe of 30 people whom you've been with your entire life. You are as close to every person in the tribe as you are your closest immediate family member. You never leave their company for longer than a few hours. They raised you. You are close confidants with every single member. You all live and die by the tribe. You laugh, reminisce, and progress forward together, with each member having a clearly defined role with tangible results. Work feels rewarding. Each member does something that immediate benefits the tribe, whether that's cooking, building, hunting, foraging, making tools, scouting, etc. It's a spiderweb of connections with everyone linking to each other in very meaningful ways. We think leaving dogs on their own while we go to work is cruel. Just think how unnourished almost every single human is when it comes to belonging. How many close friends do people have that are close confidants in today's world? For most people, it's like 0 - 2. The world is extremely disconnected despite being surrounded by more people than ever. Each tribe would have had its own social pecking order too, but unlike now, there would be no way to escape if you were one of the people near the bottom. However, in that kind of environment, there would be much less stratification and much more incentive to be good to the other people in the tribe because of the high degree of mutual dependence as well as the ease of access to everyone around you. You might be at the top of the social hierarchy, but there's not much protecting you from a spear to the gut if you allow or encourage the mistreatment of any particular person. I recall a rather graphic description of a head honcho chimpanzee being dethroned when he pissed off the troop too much. I imagine cavemen weren't too different if the chief was a shithead. During Vietnam, commanding officers that weren't liked by men serving under them had a tendency of waking up to a grenade in their tent. The origin of the term fragging. Apparently 900 for instances in 3 years, just using explosives. You'd have thought those costs would have changed their tune after the first few hundred. I'm not so sure. I read about remote tribe where the locals who traded with them shared a story that one of the men in the village would kill children who cried too much. I think there was a lot of lawless behavior because you wouldn't necessarily get revenge because you were dependent on people to hunt and protect. After I read that, I popped the romantic notion of the small tribe. Our brains evolved to function on that environment. But it didn't mean it was a good society in the modern sense. They did meet other tribes and exchange people. It's why loneliness is so incredibly endemic. Imagine living in a tribe of 30 people whom you've been with your entire life. You are as close to every person in the tribe as you are your closest immediate family member. You never leave their company for longer than a few hours. They raised you. You are close confidants with every single member. You all live and die by the tribe. You laugh, reminisce, and progress forward together, with each member having a clearly defined role with tangible results. Work feels rewarding. Each member does something that immediate benefits the tribe, whether that's cooking, building, hunting, foraging, making tools, scouting, etc. It's a spiderweb of connections with everyone linking to each other in very meaningful ways. You put it into words so well. This has been something I've been thinking about for a long time. How much closer humans were with people before. I think it explains a lot of touch-starvedness and how humans need stuff like massage and cuddling. We used to do that to our loved ones. We don't anymore. Sebastian Junger raised an identical point on why combat veterans find it so hard to transition back into society, not necessarily because of combat trauma, but the trauma of being ripped away from the most extreme variation of a tribe in the modern era. One thing I've thought about a lot is how these huge network effects also diminish individual importance. I feel like the best case scenario in 2025 is you work for a small business and you're one of like 10 to 30 people who run the place. But if one of you quits or dies, the company doesn't care which it was, and B, your replacement will be backfilled within a few weeks, likely. If you're in a group of 10-30 and that's all you normally see or talk to, every single person is important to every single other person. You can't just replace them. Fundamentally different mindset towards each other. And there's also the matter of expertise. If you're a 99th percentile stick whittler, there's several million people better than you, and they all work for a stick whittling conglomerate that makes the entire world's supply of whittled sticks with like 100 of the best stick whittlers. You're not even involved. But if you're even 95th percentile at stick whittling, you're one of like 2 people in your tribe who can pump out sticks, and you get the satisfaction of being regarded as the best stick whittler, and you see your sticks everywhere, and everyone appreciates that your sticks make their homes and half their arrows and so on. Yes, this is basically Marx's idea of alienation. I often think this is what entertainers must feel. Almost every classroom has a kid or two who likes to sing and dance. In a tribe, that kid would entertain everyone and find joy and fulfillment. Now Taylor Swift and a handful of others can entertain everyone. If you're not the absolute elite, you don't even get an audience. There are different levels to these things. Sure, you won't entertain everyone in the world, but who's stopping you from taking your guitar to the park? From heading out to a public piano? Does it compare to a sold-out tour? No, but you'd probably see 30 or so people a day who seem to really enjoy what you're doing. You don't need to sing all that well to have an audience. There are loads of open MIC nights and karaoke nights. If you want 20 to 30 people clapping and cheering for you, then find a pub or bar. The problem isn't that people can't find the audiences. It's that the small audiences don't give people joy and fulfillment anymore. They want fame and success and acclaim and notoriety and money. I've heard about the concept of alienation. Does it explicitly have to do with societies getting larger like that? It has to do with both the scale of society and the nature of capitalism. In a system in which a person's only value to the system is their labor, and in which an individual is one tiny and easily replaceable cog in a vast machine, it becomes easy for them to feel like they have little place in the world and little reason to care for it. Very insightful. But how do we know that Neanderthals had no religion? Technology evolves practically instantaneously from the universe point of view. Biology took billions of years to go from goo to humans and technology, only a couple million years to go from fire to the transistor, and about 100 years to go from the first transistor to I. What fascinates and scares me is the concept of sexual selection in humans. We select based on behavior quite heavily, and for many of us, external environmental selection pressures are basically gone. I'm largely introverted, have some quirks, a family history of depression. Guess what the mother of my child is like much the same. Not to mention the well-educated among us are having less children. Education doesn't equal intelligence, but I imagine people who are inherently sharp tend to make it further. As the great Terry Pratchett wrote it, you know, he said, it's very hard to talk quantum using a language originally designed to tell other monkeys where the ripe fruit is. I'm convinced there's a relevant Sir Terry quote for all topics. Something most people don't get is that the clinical definition of a disorder is when a condition becomes disruptive to someone's daily life. And whether or not a condition is disruptive depends on the intersection of the condition and the expectations which are being placed on the individual. Some disorders can stop being disorders with basic accommodation or changes to material circumstances. A ton of conditions are disorders not by virtue that the condition itself is crippling, But because the expectations that are being placed on the person are impossibly high, that normal individuals can barely stay afloat, and that anyone with even the slightest misstep is unable to meet those expectations. Part of the rise in disorders is due entirely to the fact that it's become insurmountably difficult to survive in a material economy that is increasingly squeezing blood from stone and which abandons anyone who does not produce value for someone else. So conditions that would otherwise be mild and manageable become disorders by virtue that they have pushed the individual over an edge that we are all one step away from. A few decades ago, we were chopping firewood, hunting many meals, digging pits for refrigerators, and smoking meats to preserve them. My grandparents described heating rocks by the fire to keep under their beds to stay warm at night as children, and using a horse and buggy to travel around. Things have changed so much in the last 100 years, in the last 50 years, heck, even in the last 20. Where do we even go from here? My grandpa, who would be 89, grew up in a farmhouse without plumbing or electricity in a not that rural part of the US. There is absolutely no way we are evolutionarily adapting at an even remotely similar pace to how quickly our lifestyles are changing. Hell, I'm 51 and I grew up in a thatched roof house with no walls in the jungle, no electricity, no running water. Our stove was made of clay and wood burning. Basically paradise. But it might as well have been 1,000 years ago, well, almost. We did have battery radio. My husband is also from Mexico and they lived somewhat similarly. It was a brick house, but all bricks made in their rancho, one room, dirt floor, outhouse and bucket showers. Even now, going to his town feels like a step back in time. It's relaxing and also incredibly hard work all at the same time. My grandpa went from a time when cars and indoor plumbing was rare to today. The last 20 are probably the biggest. The rise of smartphones has completely upended how we interact with the world and each other. I would think it's more like 30. The rise of home computing internet was the beginning of what we have now. Before, a shut-in would have only immediate physical access to those nearby. Then with the internet, it was whatever forum they found that fit their fancy. Now, with social media, everyone has it. The empathy for others is severely lacking when you're reading words on a screen and not seeing a face. Say words. Smartphones and incredibly invasive social media marketing and rage baiting may end up being a bigger deal than the Great Depression or the invention of the cotton gin, and we just don't realize it yet. Even just 25 years ago was wildly different. No smartphones, no social media, no YouTube, no streaming, no influencers. So much of our socialization now happens purely through screens. I'd love to see a lot more studies on the impacts of that alone. Guess again. More like a few hundred years ago. Labor force participation in agriculture was about 75 until about 1,850 seconds. Anxiety disorders, I think, can be a testament to that. We are smart enough to know of a problem that might happen, but our minds can't control how we feel about it. It's like our intelligence and instincts are colliding so hard that we develop our own mental disorder. And pattern recognition. We've discovered that most brain processing in humans happens in a similar way. So when it doesn't, we assume it is a deficit, while it is simply divergent. Our brains are sacks of fat with electricity running through them. It's a miracle it even works at all. It usually feels like it hardly works at all. There is precedence for this in other areas of our biology. Evolving immunities to diseases like malaria results in the occasional sickle cell anemia case. Resistance to TB can result in Tay-Sachs disease in certain populations. This is always when two people who carry the same genetic switches in the on position reproduce. Could be there's a similar switched on gene for autism. People in Europe have a higher resistance to the bubonic plague, but also a higher incidence in autoimmune issues. There's something called the hygiene theory to account for that. Basically, to survive an unhygienic environment, evolution selects for a turbocharged immune system. When you now live in a very hygienic environment, your boosted immune system doesn't just wind down, it starts attacking your own body. What you are saying is, everyone should have a mold room for health, more like having worms. Higher allergic responses might be linked to the fact that humans are now much more worm-free than our ancestors. Parasites are notoriously difficult to get rid of naturally. So when that threat is gone, but you still have the weapons, it starts targeting things it shouldn't be at least until accustomed to because it's expecting an attack at any time. This, from what I understand, parasitic worms and such, often dull the immune system to make it harder for the body to detect or eliminate them. That's why some medication just has to restart the body's natural immune system, and it's able to handle the parasite infection by itself, given enough time. I immediately thought of sickle cell as well. Evolution is at the population scale, not individual. So if 10-25 of offspring of brain differences we call autism, and a percentage of that 10-25 are so affected they cannot thrive or adapt in their environment and fail to reproduce, but the other 90-75 of offspring have just enough brain difference to exploit their environment to thrive without being so different it meets the autism definition, and that population outperforms other populations of humans, then autism is possibly an evolutionary acceptable loss on the population scale. IMO mild autism also has the potential to be directly beneficial to the family, thus increasing the odds of the humans most closely related to the autistic individual surviving as well. Savants who in modern time memorize entire cities or hundreds of years of calendars would have likely memorized large areas of land for navigation, had the ability to recognize and correctly identify a larger number of plant species than their neurotypical peers, etc. And the fact it's very common for autistic individuals to enjoy highly repetitive tasks is also beneficial. When you need 200 arrows so that all 20 men in your tribe can help hunt, you need someone who wouldn't be driven mad by the repetition of such a task. All of this is pure conjecture. Of course, I'm no early human expert. Exactly, let's not act like autism is solely a negative. Diversity of function in a society is incredibly beneficial. My child cannot speak, except to birds. He knows how to call out to them, so they're easy to hunt. Listen, he doesn't know how to care for crops, but the boy can work 12 hours a day, flint napping, loves every second of it, and he makes the best damn arrowheads in the entire tribe. I know my son rocks back and forth on the ground a lot, but he's memorized every story of our entire tribe, down to the finest detail. I honestly think I would have thrived. I work in a computer science related field and have long considered that without people who are high-functioning autistic we would have far less talent and progress would come slower. As a small example, quite a lot of small technical wins in my team come from a few people who are laser-focused on the technology to a degree most people would consider unusual. All of these people are clearly somewhere on the spectrum. I wonder how far along we would be most hard science and technology fields if we didn't have these. Furthermore, I wonder if there's an evolutionary advantage. Yes, you get some people who can't function well, but along with that, society gains people who make mental connections that would never have been made in generations otherwise. I knew I was a specimen of a higher evolutionary branch than humanity. Now please excuse me as I rewatch my favorite movie that I have completely memorized so I can calm my nerves before the family dinner where I will unwillingly embarrass myself by talking about things no one else cares about like I am doing right now. Ha ha ha. You are my kind of person. You should watch the Predator movie where they decide autism is the future of advanced human evolution. Ha ha. Who knew our obsession with singular topics and inability to make eye contact was so powerful? Dune came up with it first. Mentats are literally autists. What's your favorite movie? The Rock or Airheads? IV link to the primary source, the journal article, in the post above. The post title is from the academic press release here. Autism may be the price of human intelligence. Date September 28, 2025. Source Oxford University Press, USA. Summary: researchers discovered that autism's prevalence may be linked to human brain evolution. Specific neurons in the outer brain evolved rapidly, and autism-linked genes changed under natural selection. These shifts may have slowed brain development in children while boosting language and cognition. The findings suggest autism is part of the trade-off that made humans so cognitively advanced. So it's like the sickle cell gene trade-off? That gene gives you immunity to malaria, but if you have two copies, it's sickle cell. Europeans have something similar. Hemochromatosis is thought to be protective against the Black Plague because it paradoxically locks all the iron away so the bacteria can't get to it. OFC in the modern era, when both pathogens are treatable, best to have neither condition. It also likely gave Europeans lupus. Those who had the highly aggressive and reactive genes survived and gave their descendants autoimmune diseases. Family history of hemochromatosis. Personal history of autoimmune disease here. Would love to read more about this if you have a link. Not challenging you, just seeking info about my experiences. Fellow, hereditary hemochromatosis here. Ditto. Reminds me of something I read about how those with overactive immune systems could fight off parasites. But when we stopped having parasites, then it started attacking normal cells. I think you may be thinking of Delta 32 mutation, which is beneficial for bubonic plague and HIV. People with 2 copies are immune to both, but potentially more susceptible to yellow fever. About 10 of northwestern Europeans carry at least 1 copy of it. There is also speculation it increases cognitive flexibility and people recover from strokes and brain injuries. Wife has hemochromatosis, and my understanding is it was beneficial for hunters' warriors that lost a lot of blood and were frequently wounded. I never knew that. Thank you. And because I learned that one recently. Thalassemia has a similar trade-off, where it messes up the body's ability to produce hemoglobin, which also leads to varying degrees of anemia, but also results in higher resistance to malaria, just like the sickle cell gene would. Sadly, the severe cases of thalassemia are straight up fatal, though not that I'd reckon that sickle cell disease would be too great to live with either, with the red blood cells' abnormal shape causing all kinds of issues like a higher risk of blockages in all kinds of blood vessels, or simply being more fragile in general. It should also be noted that not all mutations that happen as a result of evolution are positive or even helpful for the organism or species they happen to. In ID, it is easily identifiable that there is a preponderance of ADHD people in various roles. There's an overabundance of autists in engineering. I work for an engineering multinational, and that place is a gravitational well for neurodivergence. Like everybody there is a bit different. I'm a scientist, and anecdotally we are overrun with neurodivergence. Makes sense for engineering too. What would be the link between IT and ADHD here? Being able to troubleshoot a problem in an unorthodox way tends to be helpful in IT and a common trait in ADHD. That and the superpower of ADHD is hyper-focusing, which allows us to power through tricky problems. Your attention is a laser pointer, but the hand controlling it isn't yours. I've always said that my brain is a finely tuned sports car with no steering wheel. Really powerful, functionally useless. I hit one little pebble in the road and I'm changing direction. Just my anecdote as an ADHD having software engineer. But compared to a lot of other careers, it seems like IT is often more exclusively results-driven rather than fixating on how we solve problems or our appearance or presentation while solving those problems. It doesn't matter if I'm distracted half the day or have irregular hours or literally accomplish nothing some days, as long as my overall quality and volume of solutions is good, my employer is happy. I would also say some of the social isolation I experienced as a kid, at least partially due to ADHD, contributed to my interest in computers, which offered a near-infinite outlet for my curiosity in whatever fixation I had at the time. IT was just a natural progression as I entered the adult world. This seems common among peers I've talked to over the years. I think the complex logical puzzles we often face in ID and our often unorthodox way of looking at such problems also help us stay stimulated until an optimal solution is found. Sometimes, I'll just hammer away at some problem I find interesting for an entire day without thinking and end up completing the majority of an entire project estimated at 2 weeks in the process. Basically, I think ID tends not to punish the deficits we have as much as some other careers might, while also allowing some of our fixation tendencies to act as an advantage. Yeah, evolution is rarely about the survival of the fittest. More often, it's survival of the, hey, it's kind funky looking, but damned if it doesn't do the job just barely well enough. And on top of that, we all carry around a load of random DNA that sometimes just decides that today's the day it's going to identify as a problem when being coppered to a new life. Of course, being a communal species, it's selection pressures that mean things that are good for the individual are often outweighed by things that are good for the group. So having a series of traits that are of limited or niche use to the individual, but which have some small viability as part of a group are likely to stick around. Someone with severe auditory and sensory sensitivity will be hard for any hunter-gatherer group to manage, but on the other hand, having Thag hyperfixating on what different types of rock produce the best flakes for scraping meat off a carcass might be kinda useful, as long as you make sure not to engage him in rock-related discussions unless you really want to listen to him for the next few hours. Though the other thing to consider is that there have been studies which correlate the chance and severity of autism to the age of the father. which may indicate that while some level of autism is always likely to be prevalent, as the study suggests, due to certain trade-offs, it would have been mitigated somewhat during our evolution by higher mortality rates, pushing the average age of fathers down. Hell, evolution is more like, does this trait make it less likely for the organism to reproduce before it dies? That's it. Nothing more fancy than that. That is literally what survival of the fittest means though. People tend to associate being the fittest with the Übermensch, but the fitness being tested is just reproduction. So keep in mind that the fittest human, by this standard, was probably Genghis Khan. This is a controversial thing to say, but one that many people have noticed. Many scientists, artists, and writers of the past have had low support autistic traits. The downside is low functioning, autism. My sister worked with autistic children and they need 247 care and will never be able to live on their own. Some are a danger to themselves and potentially others. As a low-support autistic person, if the sensory overload was more severe, I can see how it leads to severe disability. I definitely feel like I navigate the world in a way that has to be more sensitive. As someone on the spectrum, would consider it more a byproduct than a price, but very cool nonetheless, and can certainly see the argument at higher support needs. No wonder so many brain-dead politicians are against the condition. Imho, it's not the price, it's the product. I work in engineering. Most of the most brilliant people I work with are on the spectrum. Most non-autistic people have no interest in arguing about routing protocols to figure out how to best support our network. I work in engineering too. Always wondered if gene picking for your kids become real, we might lose half the engineering workforce, and especially really brilliant people. The nasty ableist fear mongering, especially in the US, definitely isn't helping. Thank you. Autism is the price we pay, or autism could happen to you. Maybe, just maybe, autism is just a different modality of being, no different than race or sex. Instead of neurotypicals constantly in fits for having to condescend to treating autistic people like humans, may just accept we are humans. Instead of having to justify our existence or prove that we are worth it, we just accept some people are different. I recall a paper I read. We'll need to find it. I'm a bit drunk RN that found that engineers are more likely to have autistic kids. Anecdotally, I also noticed many autistic people and autistic traits in neuroscience. To a point, I almost never disclose my autism to other neuroscientists unless it is relevant. Usually my autism is enough of a problem that I have no choice but to disclose. Both my parents are engineers. My mother's all 8 siblings are engineers. And I'm on spectrum, and guess what? I am an engineer, together with all my siblings. All you brilliant people should try to actually read what this article is saying. TLDR, people with autism are basically X-Men. This is not surprising. Autistic people tend to have heavier brains and more neurons. Early autistic brain development is characterized by the brain growing faster than usual, and with more local connections, but fewer connections between separate parts of the brain. For non-autistic people, the brain also regularly prunes excessive neurons, but for autistic people, that happens less. Then in life, autistic people are more likely to navigate the world through cognition, like figuring out systems, patterns, and rules, rather than automatically vibing with other people and using intuition. For me, computers and other logical things are easy to pick up, but connecting with people is much more difficult. I'd love to hear a no-filter assessment from my psychiatrist. In gifted circles I have been a part of, I like to discuss who all would trade their mental illnesses and disabilities for an average IQ. It feels like an impossible question to answer. For me, the abuse and neglect I endured probably wouldn't have affected me so much if I was average and healthy mentally. Purely speculation. But I definitely think ASD is hugely undiagnosed in gifted people because CPTSD giftedness has so much overlap with it. I thought being gifted was what made me different. Turns out, being gifted is what allowed me to mask my whole life, seeming normal on the outside. I lived for 28 years thinking I was normal, only to find out nothing about how my brain works is normal. My social skills have tanked because now that I know all the little things I do aren't normal, I hyperfixate on them and freak out. I think a lot of neurodiversity issues are more to do with our environment and social settings. ADHD humans would rock in a world of hunter-gathering survival. Autistic humans would be our shamanic guides full of inspirational ideas. People who sleep during the day would guard us during the night. But hey, at least now we can get burgers delivered at minimum wage at any time of the day, and everyone is unhappy. I'm no expert, but this does not come as a surprise to me. Humans are remarkably cognitive diverse compared to other species, and that makes sense. The more different we are, the faster nature can select smart social leader types. But it comes at a cost too. Being neurodivergent isn't always a benefit. Call me wrong, but I think we're all neurodivergent. It's just that we put a label autism on specific types that are not considered beneficial. It makes sense that high intelligence requires neurodiversity at the cost of autism in certain individuals. I think some people in this thread are reaching the wrong conclusion. This isn't saying that autism is beneficial. Rather, human evolution made a trade-off where cognitive abilities could evolve faster in exchange for a higher rate of autism. Kind of like how human evolution pushed fetal cranial size as far as it could go before childbirth. Death rates got too high to cancel out the benefit. It means most people will be smarter at the expense of the sacrificial people who lose the genetic dice roll and get autism or die during birth. Just goes to show, people read what they want to read. Yeah, I'm frankly shocked by the amount of people who clearly didn't read the article and have comments amounting to "I knew autistic people were smarter." It's not saying autism necessarily isn't beneficial either. Though, autistic people often have better pattern recognition skills, as well as other traits of higher intelligence. That's borne out by this paper. Clearly there's an evolutionary advantage of being right on the edge with the expression of these autism risk genes. It suggests that, for example, it may be evolutionarily preferable to be a person who is quicker at recognizing patterns, but as a side effect may also be hypersensitive to physical touch. This makes perfect sense. While the belief is that they are less perceptive to social cues, I believe in many it's the opposite and results in deregulated anxiety, but super sensitive to external environments such that many retreat to their own head at early age following lots of rejection when sharing true self. Autistic people are not bad at social cues. Autistic people are bad at intuiting what non-autistic people are thinking. This is relevant because holistic arc and non-autistic people are as bad or worse at intuiting what autistic people are thinking. The difference is that one side feels entitled to be understood and views their own inability to understand or effectively communicate with autistic people to be the fault of autistic people for being autistic, rather than being a symptom of their own cognitive limitations and broader sense of social entitlement. This is referred to as the double empathy problem and is not new. Hot damn, is that a sensationalist headline? Why is it always Stanford with the overhyped viral studies? I swear, their PhD programs are 10 science and 90 social media hype training. The actual article is fine. It's the combination of MEH scientific journalism and editors and what the public promotes to virality that is the problem. My TISM brain approves this message. Weighing in with the TISM, I also support it. I'm running on a different processor than some folks. Wouldn't have it any other way. As an autistic person, I've found the article and comments here. Odd. Price of human intelligence? I flew under the radar for almost 4 decades. My intelligence and special abilities are not a price. It is part of who I am. Do my intelligence and special abilities make me more or less evolved than someone who is neurotypical? I don't even like the term neurodivergence. I am atypical. Divergence would indicate there is a normal path. And boy, have I got news for neurotypicals, you guys aren't normal or uniform. Atypical just means not typical or irregular and not indicative of its broader class. Both words have normative assumptions baked into their definitions. It is an unfortunate reality of languages that there will always be a social idea of normalcy intertwined in its construction and use. Hell, formal logic can even fall into this trap. Yeah. The phrasing also rubs me the wrong way for similar reasons. Also, it kinda glosses over the fact that cognitive variety benefits society pretty directly, not just as a secondary effect. What is this talk of next human evolution? None of this is planned, and there's no such thing as typical evolution. Calling autism and intelligence a trade-off implies so much stuff about what the article writers think humanity should value and devalue in individuals. I found the word price to be a big problem. Also, curious, could you elaborate on why you prefer atypical? I know it has different meanings like not representative, but most plainly it gets interpreted as not typical, so I'm not sure how it doesn't imply that there is a normal path. Divergence to me is more like a road that splits two or more ways, not that there is one correct road, they just go different places. I've always pictured neurodivergence more like a tree, different branches, but all part of the same thing. This isn't a pitch to get you to like the term neurodivergence. I was just curious how atypical could be interpreted as preferable.